Hi guys, we are now live. Hi everybody, welcome to this session. My name is Karen Morris-Lanz, and that's my stage name, by the way. I add the Lanz on because there's always lots of Karen Morrises in the building, and we're all HR people and we know how we get the wrong emails. So anyway, that's me, and I'm going to be introducing you very shortly to our great panel today. My background is not higher education at all. I've actually been in it for the last year. What a year to choose to join. I don't know what I thought I was joining, but gosh, we have been very busy. So firstly, to you, thank you so much for joining us today. We know how busy you all are. And if you're joining us in the catch-up, which I do a lot of in the evenings from webinar, I hope you've got a nice drink to hand as well at the same time. So as I said, my background is everything but higher education, and literally from every industry you can think of. And so my challenge was to do all industries, and this is hopefully a good thing. So let me just pass you across to everybody so that they can introduce themselves. And we're going to be starting with, I've got an order here. We're going to be starting with Neil. Neil, hi, can I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hello, hi, thanks for that, Karen. Afternoon, everyone. As Karen says, thanks for joining us. I'm at the opposite end of the experience spectrum, I guess, then from Karen, because I've been in doing HR in university sector since about 2002. Prior to that is I cut my teeth in HR in local government and with the Metropolitan Police, so I've obviously got a fondness for large public sector bureaucracies. In my time in HE, I've had a number of roles across at least 6 or 7 universities, both post 92 and pre 92, but they've all been in London. I've retained my London-centric approach, but I've had a good diversity of the different types of institutions I've worked in, so that's kind of got me where I am today and built up my experience. So I shall let Karen pass on to our next panelist.
Thank you, Neil. And actually, we're going to pass it on to Richard. Just to let you know, Richard, I can't see you, or I can't hear you. So just so you know, and I'm passing you over to Richard Billingham.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Can't see you, but hey, that's
I can see myself.
Oh yeah, we can. I think. Well, don't worry.
Anyway.
Maybe that'll make us go viral. Something will. Hi. So yeah, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Richard, sure. That'd be great.
So I'm Richard Billingham. I'm the Executive Director of HR and Organisation Development at Aston University. I've been at Aston for 4 years, but it's my first time in HE. Prior to that, I was Director of HR and Change down in Bristol, at Bristol City Council. Prior to that, I was Head of Organisation Development at Birmingham City Council, the largest council in Europe. And so my background prior to going into HR, I was in consulting, and my background is largely in change. So I've risen to the heady heights of Director of HR, never having actually been in an HR role prior to being Director of HR. So hopefully I bring a slightly different perspective.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Jonny Gifford, if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, certainly, Karen. Yeah, so my name is Jonny Gifford. I work in the research team at the CIPD, who I presume people are familiar with. My background is as an applied researcher in people management and employment and related areas. So my work centres mainly on evidence-based practice, so doing evidence reviews, encouraging professionals to make more evidence-based decisions. Linked to that, I run our Applied Research Conference, which happens in January, where we discuss research on all things HR and employment and bring together academics and practitioners. So I have a range of research interests, from job quality, good work, to conflict, to performance management, and, as we'll be discussing today, changing ways of work.
Thank you so much. Okay, right, so if you're watching live, we do have a question box in the chat box if you want to ask a question. Please feel free to use that. That's really important. And thank you so much for joining us. We know how back-to-back HR is. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's really key for us, and we're really pleased that you're here. And also just to let you know that we are recording the session so that we can play it back later on YouTube, and then we can go back as panelists and criticise ourselves when we look at it later on and go, did I really say that? And hopefully there won't be anything, as I say, that makes us go viral today. Some of us got kids in the background, but they're under the cupboard in the stairs and things like that, but so it'll all be fine. Without further ado, then let's think about the questions that we've got in front of us. And I have got a list, hopefully, of the questions. Just trying to look a little bit more prepared. Okay, so let's go straight into the first question that we have. And that is a general question, which is, what impact will the visa requirements for European citizens have on recruitment? And I'm going to go to Neil first for that one, if you don't mind, Neil, please.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Karen. Apologies, may start off sounding a bit like a politician's answer, but the question, what impact will the visa requirements have? Well, to a certain extent, we don't know, other than gazing into our crystal balls and doing a little bit of use the old cliche horizon scanning and our experience. But what I would say is, prior to certainly between March and October last year, we actually had quite an increase in influx of applicants and successful applicants for roles from the EU. So obviously some colleagues trying to get in before the door closed. But the other aspect of this is obviously around our existing EU citizens who around the settled status scheme and what happens to them potentially after the beginning of July. Again, a bit of an unknown, and as we know, we can't actually enforce them to apply for settled status. So again, that leaves to somewhat unsettled, one might say. But I mean, thinking more positively about it, I think I know a number of people, UK citizens, who've gone the other way as well, actually, and a number of our staff have gone the other way. We haven't lost too many European staff going back. They've tended to stay with us, which is good. But the actual impact, I think, in one way, I like to turn things into a positive. I think, looking at the new kind of visa requirements around sort of global talent, and the other one I quite like the look of is the other routes, because I'm the University of West London. We've got a number of creative departments as well. So the other routes around creative mobility routes as well is something that we may look to try and explore, to get some musicians, etc., coming in back in from Europe, and try and keep our ties in Europe. We still have a couple of our partners in Europe as well that we still work with closely. So again, stretching the legislation, we could even look at some of the intra-company transfers if we have to, if partners fit into that. So there's opportunities there as well to maintain those relationships with Europe. But I think, just as an end point, I think there possibly will be a reduction, and it will be a challenge for us to try and attract and recruit and retain talent from the EU. But it does broaden the visa requirements. Does actually give us a broader opportunity now to look more worldwide and more globally. And without stepping on the toes in the next question, the more kind of flexible and remote working aspects will make that kind of recruitment a bit easier. But I shall stop there before I steal anyone else's thunder.
No, that's fine, and I completely agree. Actually, I think it's a massive opportunity for global talent now. Richard, I should go. Richard, what do you think about that?
Thanks,
so you can be
Karen. Prepared. I think I'd sum it up as 40% of our academic staff are non-UK, and of that 40%, roughly split 50-50 between EU and other countries. My guess would be that there will be an initial drop-off, but that very soon people will get used to the visa requirements. It's not been an impediment for people coming to the university from other territories, and I think we will still get academic staff and non-academic staff wishing to work in UK universities. UK universities are incredibly strong as a brand, and if you're building your career in academe, they still remain an attractive proposition. So I'm a little bit more bullish, I think, about the impact of leaving the EU on recruitment.
Thank you. I agree. And I think one of the things that I've identified is really the lack of a requirement now to have to advertise and make it, that we have to go British first. I don't think that's quite a lot of, out there in a lot of people's minds. But actually, when you're shortlisting candidates, you can shortlist candidates from all over the world. And before we have to meet any of the visa requirements. And I think that's a really good thing, for our global talent pool, which I think we are increasingly focused on. Okay, so I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to add to that, Jonny. You just shake your head at me if there is anything you want to add on that at all.
I mean, not so much. Richard and Neil will have a much better idea of what's going on within the sector. I think just as a very broad point, it is really obviously critical that HR take a lead in getting to grips with the employment law on this and communicate clear messages to their staff and clear expectations. So things like, HR can ask staff what their intentions are in terms of where they plan to live. Things like checking the citizen status, settled status, and so forth. There is more work for HR to do on this, but I think it's absolutely crucial that the HR does it. And as Neil says, longer term, who knows? The appeal of widening talent pools by looking abroad has always been there, but perhaps there's more, not less, opportunity to do that.
Yeah, we've got a specific question later. We've got another question, I think, going into that sort of detail. In fact, that's a really great segue, Jonny. I think you've done me proud there. So the next question we have is, will employers be more likely to recruit overseas after seeing people don't need to be working on site? Now, I'm going to take that first because I have spent a year in international working and actually, it depends on your risk appetite. It isn't, it's very much about understanding what needs to be done to regularize people working in different countries. And I think that traditionally, as universities, we have felt it's okay to have people roaming all over the world. And one thing that COVID has certainly done is focus the mind on where everybody is and what they're doing. And I'm sure, like many universities, Warwick have done that and gone through that exercise. And you'd be surprised where we have people. And we know that there is tax liabilities building in some areas if people are somewhere too long. We know that there are social security issues. We know that there is local employment law to think through. And insurance and what happens to your pension scheme. In fact, actually, I could do a separate webinar just on the implications of and risks surrounding international working. So do I think it's more likely, which is the question? I think it depends on each university's risk appetite and the cost that is associated with that, with international payrolls, to make sure that people are regularised, to ensure that there isn't a tax risk later on coming to us that we don't see from other countries. I'm sure that other countries will increasingly look to this as a source of income for themselves, and how we manage that in practice. I mean, but many of us have got people working abroad already in CERN and places like that where we have regularised the employment status of those individuals, quite rightly. So I guess, for me, I think it's likely to. We are in a global market. We may be looking to do that depending on your international strategy. But in the first instance, I think, like many people, we just want to know where everybody is to start off with, and then we'll take a view from there. That's my initial response. I'll go to Jonny to see what you think next, Jonny. What do you think of that?
I'd add that as well as your view on risk and employment status, I think another critical factor is the organisation's perspective on face-to-face versus virtual working, which I think we'll probably pick up on in a bit more detail. I mean, in terms of predicting, I think predicting is probably a bit of a mug's game in most areas, and this is perhaps no different. But it will be really interesting to see, and we could expect some long-term shifts in attitudes towards employment contracts in general. So things like, London waiting may not apply where they may have done before. But for the moment, and this is not specifically HE that I'm talking about, we see many employers want to get back to face-to-face working as fully and as soon as they reasonably can. So I think many employers working on the basis that if we need you to come back into the office, we fully expect you to be able to do that. So, for example, having your lockdown by going back to your home country in Canada or wherever, is not necessarily something that many employers would accept.
Yes, absolutely, good point. And actually, I wonder whether Richard, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'd add at Aston, we're firmly going down what we're calling a dynamic working route. We will not reset to March 2020. Going forward, the future is hybrid working. We will not expect our staff to be on campus 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It'll be very much based around the type of role that we do. We've done an assessment of our staff. The vast majority of our staff are capable of doing some form of hybrid working, but I think, to go to Jonny's point, that doesn't mean remote working forever. That means coming onto campus when actually the work that you're doing requires coordination, collaboration, is better done face to face, where it's synchronous. So while there's technologically it's absolutely possible to work remotely, we've all proved that over the last 12 months. I don't envisage that we will have too many roles that can be done permanently from a remote location. And to go to the specific point around overseas workers, one of the things that we're grappling with at the moment is actually trying to identify where people are in the world. With people being remote, most people haven't had to come onto campus in the last 12 months, and we've located so far 25 different countries that our academics are currently working from, either because they're unable to return at the moment, or they've returned to a home country as well, without actually letting us know. For all the reasons that you've said, Karen, that's potentially problematic.
Yes.
So we are taking a view, I think, that that we don't see in the first instance a large scale move to having a globally distributed workforce.
Yes, and I guess I think we're all feeling that, and I'm aware that there are 12 countries at the moment where you can actually get an international working visa to work remotely for a year. I'll give that list out if anybody's particularly interested in it, where people can apply and legally work. But like you, we're looking at hybrid working. We're looking at a mixture. And it's the expense at the end of the day. It is more expensive to have people working abroad. So, but also there's the expectation now from people that we can work from anywhere. That there's a whole generation of people who actually believe that why shouldn't I be able to? So we've got to look at this area and manage it as the world changes, I think. Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else want to jump in there that I have missed? I think we've all had a bit of a say on that. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Neil.
Yeah, no, I mean, just very briefly, our mantra pre-COVID, and what we try to do is I created a word called positive presenteeism, because a lot of what we do is about focusing, and it's about our interactions with the students and other colleagues as well. And what my Pro Vice Chancellor of Student Experience calls the wraparound, and a lot of that is done a lot better in face-to-face activity. And we've had students coming back on campus who are doing practical-based courses, and our campuses have been open since last September. We've maintained an open campus and made it available, and staff are starting to come back. We've got about just over 800 permanent staff, and in the last week I've been clocking them in and clocking them out just from an interest perspective, and we had around nearly 700 staff came back on campus across the duration of last week. So there is definitely an appetite to get back to the workplace, with an element probably going forward of the hybrid working that others have talked about.
Excellent. Jonny, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, just briefly, just to add again. I mean, the talk of hybrid working is a new phrase, but clearly the existence of hybrid working is not. The more established term is virtual teams, and I think to note about virtual teams is that it's a continuum. It's not a black and white thing. Many teams have an element of virtuality. Some people might work at home, some people work face to face, and what we're seeing now that's different is the scale of the shift towards virtual teams, but it's still going to be a continuum. So it's still going to be, we're still going to have a mix of teams that work face to face and teams that work virtually. Obviously, some teams only work one or the other, but we're not in completely new terrain. And I'm sure this is something that we'll pick up on more. We have an evidence review on virtual teams, which we published last May on the CIPD website. But I think it's a really interesting area, but it's not completely new.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think I from all the different sort of background, my background working with high technology companies, working with global companies, we just haven't perhaps come across it so much in higher education. I'm used to working in this way, and for some of my team, when we actually did go remote, it was a bit of a shock, I think, to be honest. I think we were, oh gosh, and I said, this is how you use Teams and start, so there was quite a bit of a learning curve, but I think I think it's an area that we will move in. Okay, so I think we'll go to our next question. EDI, equality and diversity, is a hot topic. What can we do to ensure it sustains momentum and doesn't fall off the agenda? I'm going to be answering, this very quickly. I was saying, well, with respect to the question, I don't think it's a hot topic. I think it is the topic, and it'd be interesting to see what our panelists think. So I'll go to you, Jonny, first. How are we going to stop this falling off the agenda? That'd be very interesting.
I'm not sure it has fallen off the agenda, as you suggest, Karen. I mean, you could even say you might be surprised that it hasn't fallen off the agenda more. I mean, there's been so much going on in the world of diversity and perspectives on diversity in the last year. From recent discussions of women's safety to Black Lives Matters, and to disadvantaged groups facing certain outcomes of the lockdown more severely than other groups. There is at the moment, I would say, a lot of momentum behind questions on diversity and inclusion, and I think the question for me is how can we just make sure that we're responding to that momentum and to the expectations in a most productive way. That would be my initial thoughts.
Neil, what's your view?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Thanks, Jonny. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not off the agenda. It is the agenda. But again, just picking up Johnny's last point, I think it's about keeping the momentum, but keeping it focused and keeping it rational, and keeping it actually pragmatic, and how it can actually impact. And in one area, we're doing a lot of work around. We've done a lot of work in the university around ethnicity and gender, but we're beginning to broaden out into a more intersectional approach. And over the course of the pandemic, the area that has really raised with me is around staff with disabilities, an area that, it's a fairly small percentage, but it's not a bad representative percentage of our staff workforce. But again, they've always been the kind of correlations, I think, in some of the EDI work we've done in the past. And so the issues around both mental health and physical health coming forward in respect to that from a diversity angle is something that we've really picked up on, looking about the, you know, how easy is it for people with mobility concerns to get around the campus, especially as we put in one-way systems.
Yes.
You know, so it's been bringing that onto the agenda much more. But also on the broader topic, whilst we've been working more remotely, it's given us within HR and the OD team the opportunity to promulgate more information online, more development opportunities online, and this will come up in a question later on. But a lot of the work we've done has been focused around the equality, diversity and inclusion as we move to broaden our inclusion as a university.
Absolutely, and of course the stats show, don't they, that we're actually all fishing in a very small pool. And so, you know, part of what I guess we've got to do as a collective is increase the pool, you know, as well in some of the diversity strands. I am not sure whether where are we now? I'm wondering whether anybody wants to add to that who hasn't already, which is Richard. Did you want to jump in there at all?
I think for us, Karen, the issue is driven by the fact that 75% of our undergraduates are from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups. I think we're possibly the most diverse university in terms of our student body, or very close to. You know, the student body, the people that we serve, will not allow it to go off the agenda. We have a great track record in in widening participation, and one of the keys to that is that students who come in can see role models, and that those role models exist at all levels of our organisation. So it's fundamentally for us a business issue. It's not about just chasing whatever the latest agenda is. It is actually about what being an effective university in sort of the centre of UK's second largest city is.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so next question we have is how can we ensure, I should have worn glasses, but then hey, I can see it from here. How can we ensure that learning and development is still taking place while everyone is still working remotely? Now that's a really interesting topic, because I would say that in the first instance that everybody's responsible for their own skills bag. I'm a real believer in making sure that you motivate yourself to do your own skills bag. But also we haven't stopped. I mean, a lot of learning and development is delivered online. And I guess with COVID in particular, that's become much more focused, because the skills gap has become so noticeable between those online and those not online. You know, all of a sudden, what was 10 years worth of skills development in terms of technology in particular, overnight, there are those that do work online and those that don't. And I'm not sure, and therefore we need to get people reskilled. And that's actually something that we've managed to do amazingly in Warwick. We have a programme to cross-skill people that wouldn't normally use technology in their day-to-day work, and we're actually starting a pilot of that actually next week as it happens. So and that I guess is, you know, a lot of people that were furloughed were people who couldn't work online, and I think that that's quite a large proportion. So how do we make sure it continues in terms of that question? I think we just make sure it does. You know, we're still doing online. They're still doing online conversations about performance and whatever. We've managed to do quite a lot. It's a year later. We had to do some of these things. So I think it's really important that we allow people to identify their skills gap and manage it. That's what we do in universities. We do learning, you know, and we should be the best at it. So I'm just going to, stop rambling on now, and that's my opinion. And I'm going to go to Jonny. What do you think, Jonny?
I think there's a big opportunity. Obviously, if people are working remotely, then just at a practical point of view, they're cutting down on their commuting time. But also, although there's people are missing face-to-face conferences. I know I am, and I know certain others are. But on the other hand, you know, webinars have become a lot more accessible. Certainly, we've seen very large numbers attending a lot of webinar type events. I think the big question for me is, how do we do digital learning effectively? So both things like virtual classrooms, where you've got sort of live synchronous type events like what we have here, as well as other forms of digital working. This is an area we're currently doing another evidence review on, sort of trying to bottom out the, you know, what we know from the scientific research on what works, what doesn't, what should we do. Much of the evidence we have is really just transposed from what works in education more generally. So there's a little bit of a guessing game, but having said that, there are really well experienced digital learning experts, and we need these experts now more than we ever did before.
Yeah, completely agree. And Neil, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I'd absolutely echo what yourself and Jonny have said in respect of it's continuing, and it's been growing. And as I alluded to in the answer to my previous question, you know, we've adapted, we've changed the way we do things, and it's given us the opportunity to put on a lot more activities, and there's been a greater in uptake. And again, you know, just we'd lined up face-to-face sessions with providers before the pandemic. We negotiated with them. They then designed stuff to be done online, and from a cost value for money perspective, we could actually get more people attending than would have been under the original cost. So from a selfish perspective, that's been very useful. But it's promulgated the learning wider across the institution, because people don't have to travel to it, etc., etc. So and it does give people the opportunity in time to learn at their own pace. Again, coming up with some of the learning and development cliches, doing the bite-sized stuff and making it smaller, more focused activities that we can engage in. And again, we look at the uptake of it, and we can monitor and understand the appetite for what people are looking for, and how we can better adapt what we're doing and what we're providing. So, you know, my OD team have actually been thriving through this in respect of developing new ways of doing things, and seeing the provision being taken up on a lot wider scale.
Thank you. I'm just also going to reach out to the audience as well. I'm going to go to Richard in just a second, but you know, if there is anybody actually out there, we may actually be talking to ourselves all day, but that's fine. If there's anybody out there, you could make yourself known in the chat. You can ask a question, but you can also, you know, we'd love to hear your points of view. It does, you know, it's very important. This is a session for you guys to get what you want. So please do, you know, make a comment or whatever. You know, obviously we'll stamp it out if it becomes abusive, but please do. It would be really great. And Richard, did you want to add anything on that?
I think the only thing that I'd add is perhaps pick up a couple of points that you made, Karen, which is we have a we have a significant challenge, which is generally raising the skills of people to be able to adapt into a new way of working. You know, the last 12 months has accelerated trends that might otherwise have taken 5 years or more to come to fruition, and the need therefore for all of us in whatever roles that we've got to learn in order to be able to cope with that pace of change, or to actually reinvent ourselves. And I think it's sort of the second point is everyone taking responsibility for their own learning. You know, a lot of learning and development previously has been handed down by organisations to their staff, and people have engaged in those learning opportunities usually in a classroom style setting when they've been given the opportunity, and I think the chance now is to engage in all sorts of learning, and that needs to be directed as much by the individual as it does as it does by organisations, by universities.
Yeah, sure. And Jonny, I think you want to come in there.
I just wanted to add perhaps a slightly different perspective or a proviso. I think that, yes, as both you, Karen, and Richard have said, individuals do have responsibility for their own learning, but I think that managers and HR also have responsibility for people's learning, both from a point of view of developing a kind of learning climate within organisations where it's not only acceptable to spend your part of your working hours doing self-development, but it's even expected that you will do that. But also in terms of managing workload, I think that one thing that we certainly hear is that many employees, many organisations have felt under the cosh. The transition to greater remote working has required a lot more work in many areas, and it's very easy to feel like you've just got Zoom meetings booked up to the end of the financial year or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think finding time for learning and development is something that managers and HR and even senior leaders need to take some lead on, so that it's not only you're responsible for your own learning. It needs to be very actively supported, and I think especially now.
Yeah, and actually Neil wants to come in. Great.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Karen. Just absolutely to reiterate what Jonny said there, and I do like my cliches. I've come up with giving colleagues the opportunity, the license to learn time, and actually, in my team's objectives this year, I set them aside to make sure that they're doing 2 hours of CPD activity every fortnight whilst in this climate, and that's something that we're definitely encouraging across the university.
Okay, so thank you very much. That's great. I'm conscious of the time. It's 12:37, so it is unlikely, I think, that we are going to get to all the questions today. So if anybody's joined today and there was a specific question that they wanted to cover, if they could I've just had a little flag saying that my battery's going low, but it's okay, I'll manage that in a minute. But if anybody wanted a particular question that we've got, I'm just going through a list now, but if you put and we haven't covered it yet, if you want to make it known in the chat, I will make sure that we get to that one as quickly as possible. Okay, so next question. Do you have any suggestions or tips to improve the recruitment process when everything is being done online? How can you ensure we're getting the right candidates? Now, you see, this is another whole session, guys. Asking these questions that are just so big, and we've got to jump into that. I suppose I'll take it. Well, I mean, obviously, I would say that technology. There's a lot of things we can do now with technology in terms of videos pre-recorded online and things like that. That will help, and that also helps manage people's time and ability. But obviously, there's a whole employer branding, the attraction piece, culture. Why would you want to come and work at Warwick? Loads of good reasons. I have to just throw that in there. But there is a lot, of different strands in here, and that is such a big question. I don't know. I would struggle to just answer that on my own. So while I go off and worry about my battery, which is plugged in rather scarily, I'm going to then pass you over to Richard to see what you think.
Thanks, Karen. I think actually, from my perspective, we probably made some significant strides in the last 12 months. The forced nature of remote working and therefore remote recruitment has really required us to think about our recruitment experience, the online experience, both in terms of the application, but also through to interview and so on and so forth. A lot of online interviews have worked really well during this time, and I think we've got into actually how do we do that effectively and make it a good experience for all of the candidates who go through that. I know that there is a lot of different technologies coming onto the market. I think from an HR perspective, it absolutely is crucial that we think through our end-to-end processes and how we leverage digital to make those a good process from the customer's point of view rather than a convenient process from an HR or recruiting manager's point of view.
Yes, completely agree. I don't think I've ever seen processes quite like this when I came in. If I'm being honest, it is. That's what I'm saying. I think it's a topic completely that we could start all over again and have another session on. Okay, I'm wondering who else wants to come in there. Jonny, did you have a view on that?
Yes, definitely. I think if you're thinking about how can we carry on doing things in the way that we've always done them before, but in lockdown, then yes, certainly there will be challenges. So just the challenges to carry on as normal. So if you're just practically thinking, if you're an interviewee, you've got an online interviewing panel, it can be harder to do things like pick up on signals on what people are interested in or when you might wrap up a question. But I also think that if we broaden out our thinking and think about what we're trying to do here, which is identify talent, identify people who are likely to perform well in roles, there's a real opportunity here to change the way in which we recruit. We did another evidence review on this, which we published, called Ahead for Hiring. And one of the key things that we found in that is that to predict someone who's going to be performing well in the job, you need to make the selection process as structured as possible. You need to weed out all of the opportunities for bias, including unconscious bias. And when you have face-to-face interviews, in particular unstructured face-to-face interviews, there is a shed load of opportunity that you are opening up to make biased decisions. So if we focus on things like having job relevant tests, having job relevant examples of work and assessing those in a systematic way, there's actually an opportunity to do things differently here in recruitment and to recruit much better than we did before. I think there's far too much reliance on unstructured face-to-face interviews. It's lazy, it's not effective. We like to do it though because we like to be able to meet people and we like to be able to use our gut feelings when we're hiring people. We like to think that we're able to spot the future talent and the stars of the future, but the research says we can't. The research says make it as structured as possible. So I think there's an opportunity.
That's amazing. Yes, I agree. And I know that Neil will probably be itching to come in on that. Go on, Neil.
We're talking about body language. You could probably see my body language. Yeah, I mean, just coming on Jonny's point, as I say, I've been working in higher education for 19 years now, and we have always done structured. Every university I've worked in, we have always had a structured approach to our selection processes. So that in itself isn't new to us, and the challenge for us actually is more. We're now moving, we've just written a new people strategy in there. We've codified what our people values are, and we're looking to recruit to values. And the kind of challenge for me now is I think the online recruitment activities are going to be harder to do some of that recruiting, looking at values and people's beliefs and behaviours through the online recruitment process. That said, we have instigated in a number of areas. We've done triaging type interviews, so we've actually, everyone who's applied for a job has had the opportunity of, when we obviously once they've met the essential criteria, so a broader shortlist than we might normally have had, to do it in different stages. So we'll have a first interview with, say, maybe two structured interview, to pick up on Jonny's point, structured interview to 10 people who may not have had the opportunity previously, and then it moves through different stages of the process. So I think that's helped us to be a bit more robust in what we've been doing.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so we got let me just look on time. We're doing okay. We've got 15 minutes. So again, that wonderful audience that's out there, if you want to ask anything, now is your chance. Time is ticking away. I think I'll go to the next question. Is how are you managing people with circumstances when thinking about team meetings and teamwork? Okay, so you know, I guess has my way of managing my teams changed during COVID? Yeah, it has. I've actually put in a lot of well-being time. We've done things like make chocolates online, and that was a big team event. And I actually scheduled that in because of this work-life balance that we're not doing at the moment. HR is HR. And we have been flat out. I mean, furlough is a dirty word, and it feels like swearing actually at people. I even got a T-shirt made for that for the team to keep everybody's spirits up. It's actually planning that engagement, I guess, and making sure that we're doing things. So with chocolate making led to making cakes online, and we had an art drawing session. Anything that didn't really cost people any money, we've done as a team. And it's amazing when you start using that creative side of your brain, how it helps you to switch off from the absolute, and I know we're no different to anybody else, the volume of work that is coming through our inbox at the moment is phenomenal. So I'm hoping I'm answering that question, and I'm assuming that with circumstances, all those people who've had kids and, you know, calling all over them, we've had, you know, kids in meetings, we just, you know, manage them as we would manage our people and our, you know, normally as we can, and actually bring about a new normal that it's okay if my dog starts, like my circumstances, it might be my dog barking or whatever that might be. And we've just done it with feeling. And I think, you know, you have to have empathy in HR, and we have to just, you know, manage as we have been able to, and looking at the well-being of every individual and how we manage that has been very important to our working culture. And I'm going to pass you over to Richard and see what you think about that, Richard.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that, that Karen. You know, I think certainly we in Aston pivoted really quickly to working online and learnt very quickly what the challenges were for people working from home, having to homeschool, having wider responsibilities. We had a COVID pledge, which was essentially recognising that those are challenges and were challenges for people. Perhaps if I just focus on what we're going to do going forward and some of those issues, I think we're recognising that there's a whole host of meetings that have actually been better since we've been online. We used to have, for instance, an irregular termly senior manager group of around about 120 individuals. We had to do that. When we did it face to face, we had to do it in 2 lots. Typically, we'd do it in a lecture theatre. Typically, it would be a number of talking heads giving presentations, and there'd be very little interaction. We now do it fortnightly. It's online. The communication from top to bottom of the organisation has been vastly improved. And there's much more interaction. I think we've learnt to interact in these types of meetings much better. People who wouldn't previously have asked questions have been able to comment, have been able to contribute to meetings. So we're giving some serious thought to what do meetings look like when we return post-pandemic, which ones we'll continue to do using Teams, which ones might very well benefit from being face-to-face. I do hear a lot as we're talking about hybrid working about, well, it's really difficult to have some people on Teams and some people in a physical meeting. We've established 12 Teams meetings rooms across the campus. Technology will sort that problem for us. So those 12 meeting rooms have 75-inch screens with a camera embedded, and those cameras follow speakers around the room. And actually, regardless of whether you're in the room or you're joining via Teams, it's a really good process. So I think, you know, going forward, this technology will be part of that future. I don't envisage that we will return wholesale to a situation where we're only having face-to-face meetings. Quite clearly, there are some meetings which will benefit from being face-to-face. Those are largely ones where, you know, a high degree of collaboration is required. But other than that, You know, I think this technology is with us for the future, and it is developing at such a rate that what we think is difficult now will not be difficult in 6, 9, 12 months.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And you know, I think even the development of where the webcam is because we've got used to not seeing people's eyes, you know, not looking into people's eyes, and I think that's one of the biggest communication things. But at the moment, I'm looking at the webcam now, and I'm not, you know, but actually it's up above. So while I'm looking at that, I can't see your eyes. So I can't see you, you know, when I look there, I can see you, but if I actually look at the webcam. So I think the positioning of the webcam in the laptop might be, you know, one of the things that they'll look at later on. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in there. I'm really conscious that I am supposed to be chairing, and I'm watching our time like a hawk. But if anybody wants to jump in, then wave madly at me on the panel. If not, I think I'm going to go to some of the HE specific questions. We've got a couple I'm trying to jump in there, and also I'd really like to get, you know, to squeeze in our takeaways. But you know, just shout at me if anybody specifically wanted to. I've got Jonny.
Yeah. I mean, I'll try and be brief, conscious of time, but I think that this is such a big area. I think it's how we manage a greater, you know, virtuality of working. We know from research, for example, that virtual teams tend to face the same kinds of challenges that face-to-face teams face, but the challenges tend to be greater and harder to overcome. So things like that are important in normal teams, like trust, like social cohesion, these are all really important as well in virtual teams, but they can be harder to build in the first place. And when they're not there, the consequences are more severe. So I think that this is it's a major area to work on. The technology is clearly a big part of it, and I think we know from research that what we call media richness is a major influence on how effective virtual teams are. So things like the quality of the mic, but also protocols on how people use the technology. So do you have protocols on raising your hand, on advising people how to light their meetings, so you don't have people on like that, you have people on like that, but also who's joining meetings. I think there's a really good opportunity now to get to some of the research on what makes for good meetings. It's very often you'll have people in meetings who don't really need to be there. Strip that out. Feel free to reject meetings if you feel that you don't need to be there, so that you can have more focused. And the question of having mixed face-to-face and virtual meetings, I think, is a tricky one. And basically it doesn't work very well. So there's a case, for example, for if some people who need to be in a meeting are joining virtually, well, why not make everyone there virtual, rather than having some people in a room talking to each other over a microphone and have one person dialing in through video, that kind of thing. But it's a big area to bottom out.
Yeah, and I think that is some really interesting points. And I actually had the opportunity recently to join a multiverse. And I hope a lot of you are going, what's that? What's a multiverse? I had a headset on and you're actually in a room talking to other people like you're in the same room. I mean, our hands are a bit weird in it because it's a virtual space, but it's a passion for me, people and technology and how we're going to be together. I did an HR job and I was also a CIO. So the merging together, I think I use that hybrid working idea a lot quicker than other people, because I don't see it like that. I mean, you're a hybrid person, are we technology, are we people, or are we combining the two? And I think so, check out the multiverse. That is going to be the technology thing of the future for learning, for everything. So if you haven't done so already, and I think there was a video of me on somewhere on Sage or something, in a multiverse, and it's really weird because you get these little cartoon characters on a very pinched waist choice I have in that. I'm sure that that wasn't quite the reality. That it was a good reality for me, but not in reality. Now I am really conscious of time, and I know I've got a couple of other questions, but I think really what I think I need to do now at 5 to 1 is to go to some kind of like summing up of what we've learned today. And I think some of the other things we can come back to, you know, we can have more sessions like this. It's great. And I'm happy to do that. And some of these maybe we want to expand out into more detailed sessions. And I think the technology and people one, of course, you know, it's a passion of mine. And I think something, you know, particularly there's lots of themes that have come up out of today that I think are quite relevant to that. And I think we're all very keen to learn, because it is our new world, you know, at the end of the day, we need to get that. Okay. Right. So thank you to Sally for her little comment there on the thing, saying thank you to us. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I guess from each of the panelists, I'd really like to know what your key takeaway from today is. Mine is that, you know, people are, you know, again, the centre of our universe. The people in technology, of course, I love that, because that is my passion area. If I was an academic, that'd be what I'd be studying every single day. I wish I had become an academic now that I know what it is like to be an academic. But there we go. I'm just wondering what other people think. I'm going to start with Neil, just because Neil's got camera on, I think, and he looks eager and keen to say what his takeaway is.
Yeah, just is it a takeaway, or is it a delivery? And is it a contactless delivery?
Whatever you want. Yeah, whatever you want.
I mean, I just think, picking up on your last point there, Karen, you're never told to become an academic. There's still time. So there you go. Get working.
I'm not old anyway. It's just the way I look.
Experienced. That's the word.
Yes,
yeah. And you talked earlier about, you know, being hybrid and whatever. And again, my career, I've kind of adopted the attitude of being a chameleon. You adapt to every situation and you make it work, and you do your best to make things work. So for me, the takeaway then from the session, and just reflecting back on all the conversations and the pandemic, has been the opportunities this has actually given us to do things that we haven't been able to, we've thought about for a long time, do things a bit differently, involve the technology, make things smoother, refine. Again, going back to what Richard was saying about meetings. Do we need all these meetings? Do we need everyone there? So it's giving us the time and the opportunity to reflect on that and think about how we can do those workplace interactions better in a more focused and structured way going forward. So those people who know me, my glass is always more than half full, and so I think that there's lots of opportunity coming out of that. So that's what I'm taking from today. The questions we've had, the responses from other colleagues on the panel, has been that it's good. There's good stuff. I shall stop. I could go on.
Jonny, I'm going to go to you next. What's your key takeaways from today?
So chocolates, yeah, cake, that's all good. We've had as well some live cooking sessions with an Italian colleague. I call that our employee engagement strategy. I think that there are more seriously challenges to, you know, adapting to the new ways of working. Doing anything different takes time. It takes more work. It takes more effort. You know, and that's the same for everyone in our organisations. So I think we do need to be really careful. I would say, in particular, about employees' well-being. I think that if there's one sort of critical thing to keep an eye on at the moment, is that we're not creating more pressure through our expectations. However, I would say that, as with Neil, I'm also more glass half full than glass half empty. I do think that there are some real opportunities to kind of chuck out the chintz and, you know, get rid of some outdated practices and use the opportunity to do things which perhaps we've kind of thought about doing previously, or perhaps we've known that we should have been doing, but now, you know, let's use the opportunities to work more smartly, whether that's in recruitment or whether that's in having effective meetings or whatever it is.
Absolutely, and I guess that's the whole sustainability issue, isn't it? What do we mean by sustainability? And it is about being, you know, using our resources in every sense more wisely. And I think that's a very good point, Jonny. Richard, what about you? How are you thinking and feeling about your takeaways?
perhaps it's the stock in trade of working in HR, having an optimism bias.
Yes,
I think you know, I just see this period of time as one of tremendous opportunity. I think that the changes that have been brought about by an enforced lockdowns over the last 12 months, the massive shifts that we've seen in the ways of working have done jobs that in other times would have taken a long time to start to embed. And I think we absolutely need to seize the moment to do this. I think we need to be agile in doing it. I think we mustn't underestimate the forces that will be there to retrench and reset back to a March 2020 version of work. And I think we mustn't miss the opportunity as we move forward to be bold about what we do, to influence our organisations, yeah, I think, you know, this is a really exciting time for us.
Fabulous. Okay. I think we're just coming to time now. Just to close, just to remind you that the recording will be available on YouTube. That's great, which I'm looking forward to looking at. And hopefully there isn't anything that's going to make us go viral. If not, actually the content should, because I think we've had some really good discussions today, and we're really thinking about our strategies for the future, which I think is really important. And just finally to say to everybody, thank you for joining and sparing us your time. And on behalf of jobs.ac.uk, thank you to the whole of the panel for coming today. It's been a lot of your time, and we really appreciate that, to share your knowledge and your thoughts and with us at a time when we are amazingly busy. So thank you so much for all that. Unless anybody wants to add anything before I go, I'm looking around at the panelists and they're all looking all happy, so that's great. So please share this with your network. You know, and if you're watching it at night and you have got a glass in your hand, well done you. I've given that up for a few days, just until the end of Lent, so that's good for me. And thank you so much, and hope to see you again. And if you've got any other questions, then please put those into Jobs AC and we'll see what we can do to answer them. Thank you so much. Goodbye.